This conference will now be recorded.
And we're joined now by Dr. Glenn Fleisig, the research director at the American Sports Medicine Institute. Dr. Fleisig, thanks for joining us today. So glad to have you on the show.
Jeff, great to see you again. It's been a while, I think. We used to get together and back when you were with Toronto and over the years, so it's good to see you again.
Yeah, you as well. I was just mentioning to you the last time I saw you in person was just pre-COVID at winter meetings in Las Vegas, where, of course, I think the whole industry, Dr. Fleisig, it's fair to say, is on a mission to kind of solve this injury mystery that's in front of us. And we've got so many great people working on it. But your presentation at those meetings, it was maybe the presentation just before me or a couple before me. You were talking about the top 10 contributors to injury in baseball. And it was a great countdown. And some of the things we kind of figured, but you're counting that, and this is number six. And then you got, and number five, the number five contributor to injuries in baseball is anxiety. And you actually stopped me in my tracks there because that, honest to goodness, wasn't on my radar. And when I started thinking about that and how you were explaining it and breaking it down, I'm going, man, that's incredible because that is another factor that we can get so in front of if we just had sort of that attitude of sort of maybe pre approach or prehabilitation kind of an approach.
Well, on that part, I'm very biomechanical, I'm very mechanical, but humans are not robots. We're people, and sports psychology is huge, Jeff, and for baseball and other sports, both for the healthy athletes and for the injured athletes and for the athletes with anxiety. So, sports psychology is a huge part of performance and staying healthy.
Yeah, and I think that teams now are starting to get an idea of how big and vast this whole world of sport performance is. Back in my day, I came into baseball at just an incredible time. I was maybe the first or second full-time minor league strength coordinator in baseball. So it was I don't want to say it was the Wild West, but there were teams that were just discouraging players from getting into the weight room. Now we see the massive changes in such a short time. We still have a long ways to go. So maybe this will be my first broad question to you, Dr. Fleisig. With all the incredible people, I think back to that winter meetings and the incredible people sitting in that room, from the doctors to the sports medicine people to the biomechanics and the sports analytics, and yet the injury rates continue to rise. It's a mystery,
Yeah,
or is it?
yeah, I've made my career trying to prevent injuries. I've partnered up with Dr. Jim Andrews since the 1980s, and so it's been a long time. Dr. Andrews recently retired, but our institute still going, and we've had a wonderful moments and a lot of frustration also because injuries, for all our good effort, injuries keep piling up. I want to point out one of the things you said. You were one of the first minor league strength coordinators in Major League Baseball. I want to point out, as I recall, about 20 years ago, what was not new is strength and conditioning was not new to baseball, but paying attention to the minor leaguers was new. The major league level had strength coaches and everything, and minor league was not being developed, whether it was nutrition or strength and conditioning. But Major League Baseball as an organization has done a better job of handling their minor leaguers as, and not just say we'll worry about them when they get to the major leagues. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
no, and that's been one of the great shifts I think in the game, Dr. Fleisig, guys. Such that precious talent, right? That now that we're really investing in, and not that they weren't back then. I think the whole world of sport has just evolved, right? Back in the day when I started, the trainers were doing everything. They were trying to manage the injuries. They were
right.
dealing with nutrition. They were working on the warm ups and everything. So the athletic trainers, hats off to those guys. Were
Yeah.
wearing a lot of hats back in the day. So we streamlined it. And boy, I'm telling you, what an incredible ride I've been through. But watching the game advance, and you're right in the heat of it. You are not only the research director for the American Sport Medicine Institute, you're also the president of the American Baseball Biomechanics Society. This is an area, Dr. Fleisig, that absolutely fascinates me. I did my degree at University of Calgary, and that was my first exposure to the actual biomechanics lab. And
Yeah.
at that time, they were doing some of the um, groundbreaking work for Nike shoe development back then with Dr. Ben O'Nig, and I was just sort of a fly in the wall as a young student. but actually seeing that world in action started me down a path of thinking that I just could not have imagined before.
So yeah, let me. So we've made great advances in sports medicine and science as a field in the last 20 years, let's say. And it's been a yin yang, a win loss thing because a lot of the advances have made our athletes run faster, hit farther, throw faster, everything like that. But it comes with a cost. So um, the higher performance, the more guys lighting up the radar gun, has also come with a cost of pushing the elbows and shoulders of these pitchers to the limit. So one of the keys, a huge key, Jeff, for trying to get the best performance of a baseball pitcher or batter, but pitcher in this case, without getting hurt, is to have the proper mechanics, or as we call it, biomechanics. Biomechanics just means mechanics for biology, for people, for living people. And so what's happened, Jeff, it's been nothing short of a revolution. When you were back in Calgary, biomechanics was just something that happened in the lab. And frankly, over the course of baseball history, Major League Baseball, every team, teams you've worked for, et cetera, have sent people to me here in Birmingham, Alabama, to get analyzed in my biomechanics lab from the 80s, 90s, 2000s. I don't mean to talk like an old man, but that's what was happening. And that's not what,
We sent players to you, so
yeah.
no, it was a revolutionary thing at the time.
But there's a revolution going on now. So you just mentioned the American Baseball Biomechanics Society. I'm not the president anymore. I was the founding president, and we've rotated. I'm a past president now. But the society is thriving. And what this is happening is biomechanics, again, is essentially using the principles of physics on people. And biomechanics uses cameras, and we can analyze the pictures in this case and say, aha, the way you're moving, you're putting too much stress on your elbow, or you're not rotating your trunk at the right time. It's really broken down with computers and cameras. The technology is very much like how they make movies and video games. You put little reflective dots on them, and they move around. You see like a stick figure image on the computer, but we calculate their forces, things like that, and their proper motions and timings. Well, what's happening again? The elite players and high school players used to have to come to Birmingham, Alabama, but there's been a revolution in the technology and in the acceptance. You know, major league teams, there are 30 major league teams, and they're very competitive with each other, Jeff. And they, if someone has a secret, the other one wants to get on it.
Yeah.
You know, 20 years ago, that was the Moneyball principle, trying to use statistics instead of just looking at a guy. Well, now the revolution is biomechanics, where we're trying to look at the mechanics. And why teams now have their own biomechanics equipment and people has to do with, again, it's successful that analyzing pictures in my lab or elsewhere has made them better pitchers using their whole body. But the technology has advanced. I just described to you how we put little dots on people and things like that. We still do that in the lab here. But we also have another type of technology which is also used in the field, which is called markerless motion capture, and where you don't have to put the dots on with some technologies. We have both of those systems here, and we've done some comparative tests, and turns out the stuff's pretty good. So now, pick your favorite major league team, or even some college teams. They don't have to send the guys to Birmingham, Alabama to be tested necessarily. They can have equipment and cameras mounted in their stadium. A pitcher on their team or on the other team can pitch. The team captures the data. They have a biomechanist on staff who knows what the heck to do with all this data, and we can figure out, hey, this pitcher, he's not doing this right or that right. Let's fix him up and improve his safety and mechanics. It's a huge deal.
Yeah, no, it is a huge deal, and the safety side of it is one thing that really intrigues me, because when we look at the injury rates, and we can throw out the numbers, they're all out there. If we just look at the last competitive year, for example, the number of pitchers that were on the injured list, and the amount of, again, being a business, the amount of money being spent on
Yeah.
players that can't contribute to the team. But that aside, there's not one player out there, at least that I've ever been exposed to, that wouldn't give up a lot of that money just to be healthy and playing the game again. So keeping these guys on the field, is important for a number of reasons. Dr. Fleisig, in your time in the game and watching the evolution of not just the game and analytics and how the game has changed and the development of athletes, but also the science and the technology that we're now using. What are some of the major breakthroughs that have really made you step back and go, okay, that is a great advancement, including the biomechanics?
Yeah. So, you're talking about we got together in 2018 or whenever that was in Las Vegas. A few
Yeah.
years before Major League, I'm on a lot of committees for Major League Baseball, safety committees. I'm an advisor. Major League Baseball was realizing that pitching injuries, this is 10 years ago, were going up even back then. Too many injuries back then, and we studied it and we found out that the pitching injuries, the guys showing up to minor league baseball already had damage in their elbow and shoulder from the MRIs or whatever. And so what we realized was that pitching injuries, 10 years ago, we came to this conclusion, is not a Major League Baseball problem. It's not a Little League Baseball problem. It's a baseball problem. Okay. And you asked me previously whether the injuries in the pros were caused in the amateur level or whether they're caused on the watch of the pros. It's not one or the other. It's both because we're living people and damage builds up. It's not, even when a guy walks off the mound, Jeff, he blew it out on that one pitch. It's not like that was just the last straw. Typically, unless there was a collision or hit by a ball or something like that, the elbow and shoulder injuries are overuse injuries, and if you felt a snap or a pop, that was the straw that broke the camel's back, the last straw. And so these were accumulated things. What we decided 10 years ago was it was the first generation of pitchers, baseball players, who were playing one sport all year. I'm in Birmingham, Alabama. The weather's a little warmer than you in Edmonton, but down here, kids play one sport year round, and it's been going on for a decade or so. And so we made rules. Major League Baseball with USA Baseball and with ASMI made rules. A very important website. You ask what are the breakthroughs? This website, pitchsmart.org. Again, I'll say it, pitchsmart.org. I implore people to go look at that. It has guidelines that if you're this age, you should throw this many pitches. At this age, you should throw this many pitches, take this much time off, and other guidelines. And so we did not stop pitching injuries in the professional baseball over the last 10 years, but it was rising at an epidemic rate 10 years ago. And we slowed down the rate with the advent of introducing pitch count limits. I love baseball, Jeff, and so do you, and I want people to play it. But the human body, the adolescent body, is not made to pitch every fifth day, 52 weeks a year. So you know this, your strength and conditioning, you need some periodization, as we call it. You need an off season, a preseason. Major League Baseball does not go 12 months a year. There's no reason why the kid in Alabama should be on this travel team and this school team and playing year round. So not to just move on, but this is so important that kids need to develop as athletes, first of all, before they become specialized in one sport, especially the younger ones. Of course, they can specialize when they're in high school, but you can't do the same thing 52 weeks a year, 7 days a week. Okay. So I want to say, Jeff, I know you totally agree with me. I see you shaking your head that you have to have regulation and there's the right amount of development. That was, again, like I said, we kind of got a grasp on injury, but then pitching injuries have had a surge the last few years, as you alluded to. And the new thing that's happening is chasing the radar gun, chasing velo. And so we watch major league games, and the announcers and the scoreboards are saying, "Oh, he hit 100 miles per hour." It's sexy, it's exciting. That's what people are talking about, and that mentality, the teams are signing the players with the greatest velocity, not with the best mechanics or best performance, etc. And that mentality, since teams are, I'm generalizing, are doing a lot of that. The Latin American pitcher or the high school pitcher in Birmingham, Alabama, that they know that's what's going to move them ahead, not the best ERA or win-loss thing. The radar gun. And so this mentality that it doesn't matter what your mechanics are or what your performance is, I just want to hit the speed. That is our biggest issue now.
Yeah, no, and it's sort of just evolved into this monster, hasn't it? And again, that's sort of been the evolution of the game right before our eyes. But Dr. Fleisig, I have to just say you are preaching to the choir here when we talk about kid safety and preventing injuries at the youth level, because we know one of the main reasons athletes never reach their potential or step away from sport in general is the reoccurrence of injury, major injury, right? So that's one of the big things. But that point you made about the fact that, look, when the season is over, and for the teams that get into the postseason, when their season is over, that recovery time, that downtime of not even touching a baseball is so critical. And you're right. I wish that parents and players in youth sport and youth baseball would really pay heed to that because there's a lot to be learned there. But this
Jeff,
whole
I want to ask you a question on this from your
yes,
specialization as a professional strength and conditioning, and you worked in professional baseball. You didn't have your minor league pitchers pitch year round? I mean, how did you do it? Explain a little about the periodization or within season or off season, the
right.
importance of that.
Well, we the way when after a couple once I got familiar with what that whole animal was, that beast of professional baseball, we really started to understand, Dr. Fleisig, the ebb and flow of the annual plan and how critical it was. And so when our players, when the season was over, and maybe they got down to instructional league to do a little extra, very structured and keyed in work, when they were done, we shut them down from even touching a baseball. And the way I approached it was we would take them away from the game and then we would rebuild them from the inside out. Because the other thing we face in a crazy game like baseball is that one-sidedness, right? The right-handed
Yeah,
throwers are
right.
the right-handed, left-handed hitters. So we see all these asymmetries, and we actually can see the muscles get so strong and lopsided, we can actually see shifts in the skeletal alignment, right? So one of
Yes.
our priorities that we keyed in on early in the offseason was getting back to sort of a balance point. And it doesn't necessarily have to be perfect for everybody out there, but we tried to make sure the players weren't getting into that danger zone of asymmetry when it comes to posture and symmetry. So we would take the first 4 to 6 weeks, believe it or not, and get right back down to the skeleton and get to those small muscles around the joints and start balancing. And we would literally build our athletes. Every player on the team we would try to get onto this program, and we would build them from the inside out. And then we would be getting into late November, early December. We would start talking about the throwing programs for our pitchers to get ready to report in mid February and for our position players to start swinging the bat. And then we would work our way up again to get ready for spring training, 5 to 6 weeks to get ready for the season, and away we go again. And so there's this beautiful ebb and flow in the game of baseball, but unfortunately, we're losing that in our youth levels.
Now, again, going back to the youth and adolescent level, the ninth grade kid, he's not going to do what you just said per
Right.
se because he's not a professional athlete. So he should play his baseball season, and then when the season's over, maybe go play basketball or go play
Absolutely.
something else and develop as an athlete without doing the same motion 12 months a year.
Yeah, Dr. Fleisig, so right. And here's what we're seeing with these young kids that are coming in, and again, doing some really great work with Baseball Canada here. We find, the kids that play other sports, like for example, basketball or soccer, or if they run cross country, or even if they're playing hockey in the wintertime, their cardiovascular fitness is so superior to the kids that are just playing baseball year round. Here's another major contributor, I think.
And their athleticism, I would say.
Oh, no question about it. Yeah, just their ability to move, their spatial awareness, their coordination. There's so many benefits to playing multiple sports. But I wanted to ask you this today because one of the things I really keyed in on here the last 10 years or so is trying to monitor the physical fitness, the aerobic fitness of the baseball players. Because one thing that I really prided ourselves in, the guys, and I came into the Blue Jays at a beautiful time. I mean, we had back-to-backs with Henkin and Clemens, and then we had Chris Carpenter and Roy Halladay, Calvin Escobar all coming up. These guys really understood the importance of the physical side of the game, and we were very not overly aggressive, but we really paid a lot of heed into the cardiovascular fitness and maintaining that through the season. And I do believe that was a real major contributor to their ability to recover between pitches, between innings, and between games and starts, Dr. Fleisig. So one of the things we encourage kids to do is play multiple sports as long as possible.
Yes, definitely. And I want to talk a little gonna get off topic. You're just talking about fitness and cardiovascular. I want to talk about something that's been happening in Major League Baseball the past year or two, which is the pitch timer.
Yes.
And we've been doing a study. I work on some committees with Major League Baseball, like I said, and we've been looking at the pitch timer, the medical effect of it, because it was not introduced, the pitch timer rule, for safety. It was introduced for essentially entertainment of the game, improving the play of the game. And so we're taking a look right now at if speeding up the time between pitches, we want to make sure that that has not correlated with pitchers not having essentially recovery time in the seconds between the pitches. And the preliminary data looks like the first year, 2023, with the pitch timers, and has not changed the rates of injury significantly. So that's good. It wasn't supposed to, but we
Right.
want to make sure it didn't have a bad effect. And so we're looking at that data, and it looks like the pitch timer, installation of the pitch timer, or adaptation of the pitch timer, has not led to uh, more injuries for pitchers. There's still injuries in pitchers, but it hasn't really been an effect one way or the other. The other thing is, uh, it not only shortened the game for the viewers, it also shortened the game for the pitchers and the position players. They're
Sure.
out of the park for less time, and that is we haven't proven that, but that seems to be a physical benefit as well. They're not on their feet out there for as many minutes or hours. So anyway, this is something that's happening in baseball.
No, for sure. And that cumulative fatigue of just being on the field for so long, that adds up over time, especially when you look at the travel these teams go through. There's no schedule like the professional baseball schedule. It is a monster. But managing it, if you could get in tune and manage it, you can really make an impact. And you're right, though, that those extra minutes on the field, they accumulate over time. There's just no question about it. So I was actually really intrigued by the purpose of the pitch timer, and which I understand. But you're right. I've been watching closely, and I'm glad you mentioned it here on the impact on the pitchers, because that was one thing I was actually quite worried about.
Right.
So it's good to hear that. I know we hear the players saying that they're a little rushed. That might just be individual adaptation. But
There are injuries. I'm not saying, but it's anecdotal. It's different, but overall, it hasn't been a plus or minus from a safety point of view. It hasn't
yeah,
really.
Yep, yep, and that's great. And I know there's been a lot of research into that. We're talking to Dr. Glenn Fleisig, the research director at the American Sports Medicine Institute, past president of the American Baseball Biomechanics Society. You're also an injury research advisor for Major League Baseball. You chair the Medical and Safety Advisory Committee for Little League Baseball, and you're also pitching safety consultant for them. And so you cover the whole gamut. And Dr. Fleisig, your work, again, I've been following you for years. We met years and years, decades ago, and for it doesn't seem that long, but the work you've done with us at the professional level, and the work you're doing to steer youth sport, oh my gosh, just so important. And to have that full spectrum of influence is is incredible. If you look back on your time now focusing on the game, and we see this constant increase in injuries, again, we look at the people sitting in that room in Las Vegas at the medical meeting, some of the smartest people in the world in all of sport, and yet the injuries continue to rise. Do we have maybe 4 or 5 things we need to key in on now? Do we need to shift our thinking, Dr. Fleisig? Like, where do we go to course correct a little bit here? And I know velocity is the key, and
Right.
changing our attitude to velocity might be the number one thing.
Yeah. So exactly. I think nowadays emphasizing proper mechanics over maximum velocity has to be the mindset shift. And again, I'm optimistic because the 30 teams, they're not stupid. They're seeing that the velocity guys are getting more outs, but they're also seeing that getting more injured. If you throw 95 instead of 90, you might have a lower ERA. But if you throw 0, you're not doing anyone any good because you're injured. So I think the mindset velocity is the end all, is needs to shift, and it is shifting among the major league teams. They still love the velocity, and they're doing their roster management to try to have a lot of pitchers who could pitch shorter amount of times to get the maximum velocity. I understand that, but they also need to keep people safe. And I think I'm not against velocity, but you want to have proper mechanics. And frankly, Jeff, we did a study on the biomechanics lab. We found out that within a person, not me compared to you, but within a person, it was such a strong proof and relationship that the harder I throw, the more force there is, torque there is in my elbow. And so the pitchers who are going to thrive and succeed and stay healthy and have endurance are not the guys just with the top speed, but the guys who vary their speed. It'll save their elbow and the shoulder, but it'll also mess up the batters. You're more effective as a pitcher if you have a variety of velocities and messing up the batter's timing. It's also safer for you. So anyway, these are the things that we're beating the drum on. We're trying to have pitchers have proper mechanics. Again, I'm excited that the teams are embracing the technology and the specialists of biomechanics.
Yeah, no, it is. It's an exciting time. You know, one thing that we look at, Dr. Fleisig, we kind of have a three-step thing. And again, everybody, we encourage everybody in baseball, parents, coaches, everybody. That pitchsmart.org is just an unbelievable baseball resource. So, you know, in my work with Major League Baseball internationally, so I've been lucky enough for 16 years now to be consulting with Major League Baseball on player and athlete development globally. Our work in Europe has been just incredible to watch. So we're going into 16, 17 years there, but to see the evolution of the game. And the one major focus over there, Dr. Fleisig, from our side, was developing the athlete to be prepared for the game. So we started this sort of three-step approach when we started looking at pitch counts because it really wasn't a big thing over there when we started. So we started saying, okay, look, we have pitch counts, which kind of balances volume and frequency. But then we also started looking at, okay, if you have a 15-year-old, I don't know what the average throwing velocity for a 15-year-old might be, but let's say it's 70 miles an hour or whatever it might be. If you have a 15-year-old that throws 82 miles an hour, well, that's a couple standard deviations above the norm. That pitcher, as you mentioned, is probably going to be causing more damage, throwing that ball harder than his average peers. So that player has to throw that ball harder less, or the pitch count has to drop. So we started looking at that. So pitch count, pitch intensity, and then, as you said, maybe one of the magical things for me is those movement efficiencies, right? The biomechanics and the movement
Yep.
efficiencies. I think, boy, we could put those three things together. We've got something special cooking, Dr. Fleisig.
Yeah, I totally agree. Totally agree, Jeff. Yeah, you summed it up really well. Yes.
Yeah. And so, hey, let me ask you this. A couple of things that I know you've worked on really closely at the biomechanics lab was, and talking about stress and throwing, there's the age old conversation in baseball, Dr. Fly said, curveballs versus fastballs, which causes more damage? When should a young player start throwing? So have we come to a major consensus on this that sort of people can use as a guide when they're deciding how to develop their youth, but also in terms of a player who wants to chase down the dream of playing higher end in the game?
Yeah, yeah. Unfortunately, I have 30 years of work on this, and it's going to be hard to summarize in a bite size, but I'm going to try. Um,
Okay.
there's a lot of information about
Yeah.
this. First of all, we set out to study we set out to prove that curveballs were a big problem. We did field studies, we did biomechanics studies to prove that the curveballs are a problem. And it didn't work out that way, Jeff. We did our research looking at the biomechanics, looking at the field studies, and the kids who were getting hurt were the ones who were pitching a lot, regardless of whether they're throwing curveballs or fastballs. Okay? And then in the biomechanics lab, the force or torque is technically on the elbow and shoulder. Throwing a fastball or curveball or slider are similar. We did a study showing that, which is not what we were expecting. And then other people have repeated this study. So bottom line is a properly thrown curveball, fastball, and sliders are all about the same amount of force on the. So it's really about how many pitches you throw, not what kind. Of course, if you have crappy mechanics, throwing any of them is stressful. But if you have good mechanics, throwing fastball, curveball, and slider are similar. The changeup actually tested in our lab as less stress on the arm, and so it seems to be the safest pitch and a smart one. So what we say, Jeff, is at the developing level, the youth level, learn how to do a fastball. You got to don't jump to other things. Fastball. If you don't have good mechanics, and a fastball with velocity and control, then there's no point in moving on to other things. Once you have the fastball, the first off-speed pitch you should introduce is the changeup. It's easiest to learn from the fastball, and it does the job. If you're a little kid and you can make a curveball snap off, it's really cool, okay? But to be effective, if you have a fastball and you have a changeup and you're a young pitcher and you have control over both those, you are going to succeed, okay? So fastball and then changeup. Then other pitches. When you say, what age can you do curveballs and sliders? The answer is it varies. It's once you have control of your fastball and changeup, you're ready to introduce the curveball. Okay.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. And then Dr. Fleisig, with all the advents in technology now, we have the TrackMan and the Rapsodos, and this whole thing now, spin rate is a big, big conversation in the
Yes.
game of baseball, more at the higher levels. But now that conversation is trickling down to youth development. Do you have any concerns or advice when it comes to the spin rates now? Because we see youth
Yeah.
coaches trying to focus on spin rate before we even have movement efficiencies.
Right. Again, a generation ago, um, um, radar guns became omnipresent. They were everywhere, so everyone was chasing velocity, which
Right.
is still the case. Now people have technology to measure the spin. People are chasing that. So same thing I would say about velocities. Spin, I'd say the same thing, which is don't chase the spin rate, don't chase the velocity. Chase proper mechanics, proper strength and conditioning, proper rest and rehab and exercise, and then you'll have the velocity and the performance and the spin. So don't that's not what you should be chasing. You should be chasing proper mechanics and success, and then you'll have velocity and spin. You have to work on grip and everything, but the problem is if you're chasing spin rate, you're gripping too hard, you're overemphasizing, and you're going down the wrong road.
Yeah. So I have a comparison for you. This is a strength and conditioning comparison. I'll throw it at you. So when we look at our baseball players or our hockey players, football players, whatever, but our baseball players, and we're working on speed, for example. Well, we know there's two major components to speed. It's stride length and stride frequency. And one of the big mistakes we see, Dr. Fleisig, in the developmental world out there is everybody's trying to lengthen the stride to make the players faster, which is the exact opposite of what you should do. What we try to do is we try to increase frequency and turnover rate based on the athlete's growth and development and their strength. The stride will naturally increase as the athlete grows, gets stronger, and becomes more coordinated. Would that be a good sort of comparison or analogy when we talk about spin rate as well? That spin rate, it'll come around as the athletes grow, develop, become stronger, mature a little bit, figure out how to play with the
Yeah.
baseball. Is that a fair sort of a comparison?
Yeah, yes, but when you said it, it's not exactly the comparison I thought of. When you said talk about running and stride length versus stride frequency, it makes me think of the stride length of pitching,
Sure.
what
Big
and what
conversation as well, right?
and so the spin and all that stuff. What I'm saying is you want to have proper mechanics. Now, what is proper mechanics? Proper mechanics does not mean have the longest stride as possible. It does not mean have the shortest stride as possible, or the highest arm or lowest arm. For proper mechanics, there's a happy medium where the proper pitchers are in the proper positions. We published a paper I recommend for your listeners and viewers, hi viewers, is called Clinician's Guide to Proper Pitching Mechanics or Proper Pitching Biomechanics.
I have
Clinician's
it.
Guide, okay,
I have that article. I'll share it, Dr. Fleisig.
that'd be great.
Fantastic, fantastic stuff.
Because what it does, which we don't have time to do here, is it breaks down all the mechanics from the scientific stuff and shows some pictures and a few numbers and little drawings about this is what you should do. Because not everyone has access to biomechanics, but people should understand what proper mechanics are based on science, not based on opinions.
Yeah, but I love that just that mindset, Dr. Fleisig, about just being where your athlete is at in terms of their growth and development, strength, their experience in the game as well. All of those factors come into play. But there are would it be safe to say like there's hard points when it comes to pitching, things that have to happen and things that can't happen in terms of keeping our athletes safe?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, emphasizing the biomechanics. a lot of pitchers succeed and look different than each other. Okay, so there's some things that can vary, whether you hold your glove here or whatever. But there's some things that cannot vary. Our bodies are built the same, and our bodies are moving through the same laws of physics. So there are some things. For instance, pitchers. I'm going to back up here. Could pitch from more over the head or more sidearm or 3/4. But if you do that properly, you're allowed to succeed here or here. But the difference is you tilt your trunk like I'm demonstrating here on this podcast. You don't just drop your armpit angle, abduction angle, as we say. The human body is built that the arm fits in the shoulder socket and it moves well at the 90-degree abduction, meaning your elbow is basically in line with your two shoulders.
Right.
And if you want a higher or lower arm slot to pitch, don't drop your elbow or lift your elbow. Tilt your trunk to the glove side or not. So I'm using that as an example. There are some absolutes in pitching that we want. For instance, we want the abduction, the armpit angle to be 90 degrees. There are some personal variations, how much you want to tilt the trunk. So mechanics is a understanding of the physics, how the body's built, and then you can put your personal touch on it.
No, that is a great example there, Dr. Fleisig. I appreciate that a lot. I really do. It's a great visual as well. So for everybody who's listening to this, go to our YouTube channel and check this out. We're at minute 36 right now, so you can fast forward to see the great Dr. Fleisig doing the demo right there. So one last thing, Dr. Fleisig. I know we're stealing your time here, but listen, here's sort of the spectrum of your focus right now. The research director at the American Sports Medicine Institute, past president of the American Baseball Biomechanics Society, injury research advisor at Major League Baseball, but also pitching safety consultant for Little League Baseball. I just love the breadth of that.
Right.
One last thing we have to talk about today while we have you here, and that is the conversation revolving around, again, that quest for velocity, the weighted balls. I have a stance on weighted balls, Dr. Fleisig. I'm not going to taint anything here. A lot of it's led by the research you guys have done. A lot of my thinking has been formed by your work, by the way. So I appreciate everything you guys do for sure. But maybe we could just talk to you a little bit in your spectrum of exposure to the game, from the elite pro guys to grassroots development. Let's have a serious conversation about the weighted ball thing, because I think this marketing machine has really steered a lot of people in the wrong direction.
Yeah. Again, another thing, we've had 1 hour seminars on this, and it's a big topic. Weighted balls, training with weighted balls in general often increases your velocity. We'd be lying if we said that doesn't happen. However, we've also seen training with weighted balls can increase your risk of injury, shoulder or elbow injury for the throwers. So it's not good or bad. There's a place for it, okay? And for instance, the place for it is your professional athlete who has other things going well, proper mechanics, has proper professional staff working with him, and implements this as part of his throwing program. An example of the improper way to use weighted balls is you're a young adolescent pitcher. You don't have much velocity because your mechanics stink and your body's not strong enough, and you try and take a shortcut and trying to use the weighted balls. That will backfire. That's going to lead to injury. Again, you don't do step 2 before you do step 1, or step 10 before you do step 1. And you need proper mechanics and proper strength conditioning. And then weighted balls have a place. I do want to say some of the for-profit programs, sometimes they're too excessive, too much weighted balls. But I think the proper place is for an athlete who's good mechanics, who's healthy, good strength conditioning. And it's not a huge program added on top of what he already has, but you integrate it as part of the program. You don't add it on to whatever he's doing. That's too much. It's still throwing, so you can implement it and be successful in those parameters I just mentioned.
I really like that. And I think that's exactly what I've experienced too, Dr. Fleisig, in my time. One of the worst things I see. And Dr. Fleisig, these coaches and parents with the greatest of intentions to help their young athletes, right? They get a hold of these weighted balls and they see the pro guys doing it. It must be good. But seeing a young athlete throwing a weighted ball at velocity with poor mechanics, it almost breaks my heart sometimes.
Yes. Yeah, you're learning the wrong thing. Yes.
Yeah.
Jeff, I know you do an excellent job of trying to help athletes from pros to young, trying to stay healthy and condition and get to where they want. But from our sports medicine point of view, we also look at the other side. You and I have been speaking now for half an hour or whatever about how to get the athletes to be safe and prevent injury. But I want to talk just for a moment about some of the advances that are happening in the treating of injury. Okay,
Love it. Yes,
which is the
please.
other side. I want to say there, having a Tommy John surgery or elbow surgery, it's it's the wrong mindset to think it's inevitable or it's no big deal. That is not true. The truth is, the doctors and physical therapists are excellent, and the majority of pitchers do come back. But it doesn't come without a cost. First of all, you're like shut down for a year or whatever. Okay, you had to work hard in the rehab. You have to pay the doctor bill to have the surgery. It doesn't come without a cost. However, it usually does succeed. You come back, but it's not inevitable. There are a lot of pitchers who succeed without having these injuries, and you should not accept it. You should try to prevent it. If you have some kind of arm problem, tell your doctor, tell your parents, try to nip it in the bud before it becomes a big thing. However, a couple of the advances when people do have these injuries is what's called the internal brace. The classic Tommy John surgery is still done from youth through professionals, but now there's a new innovation called an internal brace. And so instead of doing a, a surgery with this internal brace, can sometimes greatly reduce the return time from the surgery. Tommy John surgery, you're going to be back pitching about 14 months later. But with if you had a full Tommy John surgery, but with this brace, sometimes you could have a UCL repair with the brace, and you get back in about 6 months. Now, not some injuries are too far gone and you can't do it. So that's one of the innovations. And the other thing I want to talk about on the return and the medical treatment thing is just this month we published our new updated interval throwing program. As you know, Jeff, the interval throwing program, I'm talking about for the injured and the rehab guys, not for the healthy guys. Interval throwing program means you've had your surgery or you've had your non-surgery, you've had your treatment coming back from injury, and you do a interval throwing program, which is a progression. You throw short distance, maybe 45 feet, then 60 feet, then 90 feet, then 100 something feet. And then you get on the mound, you throw it half effort, three-quarter effort. As you know, in professional baseball and in physical therapy rehab centers throughout the country, baseball players are going through this progress. Well, Doctors Kevin Wilk and Dr. Mike Reinold and Lenny McQueen are some of the leaders in the field have got together with me and some other scientists and Dr. Andrews, and we've just now, if you look at my name and interval throwing program, Mike Reinold is the lead author on this paper, and it's free. We have a new interval throwing program, and the difference is it's adapted over the 20 years we've been using this program. We've changed it, but the big thing is the workload. You're talking about workload before. The new interval throwing program is based on biomechanics and science, and it's a more scientific, sensible progression and buildup versus ups and downs. So I hope our listeners don't get hurt, but if you are a physical therapist or you end up in physical therapy, there's a brand new interval throwing program which will hopefully help athletes succeed and return from injury.
Oh, no, and thank you for that. So I actually have on my computer some of the interval throwing programs from our some of our players who've had the surgery with Dr. Andrews' group or fellow. And you can see it's been personalized a little bit from, but the theme has always been progressive and the same. So I'm very excited about these new advents, especially in the post-surgical situation and the return to play programming. So, so important. That is such a critical time to pay respect to Dr. Fleisig.
Yeah, but Jeff, I'm going to turn it right back on you. What you're doing is so important. I mean, we're talking about some advances in treating injury, but let's try to prevent these injuries. Let's try to have
Yeah.
people succeed and stay healthy and strong. And yeah, so thank you for what you're doing.
No, it's my pleasure. Trust me, and it's what a collaboration over the years with some of the great people. Those getting those two sides together, Dr. Fleisig. That's one of the beautiful things about this baseball world we're in. There's usually such great sharing of information for the greater good, and that's one thing I truly love. But at the same time, I'll joke around over a good cold beer that, hey, I'm trying to put you guys out of business, keeping
Yeah,
everybody healthy.
I'm
So
trying to do that also. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, for sure. Dr. Fleisig, thank you so much. Listen, so we have the clinician's guide to pitching mechanics, a critical read for our listeners, and I'll share that one. I'll just make sure I have the right with you. I'll connect with you after to make sure I have the right document for that for people to read. And the new interval throwing program is another just very recent release, and I'm excited to see that because I haven't seen that one yet.
Right. And Mike Reinhold is the lead author if you want to look him up, and my name on it. And also, if you enjoy me, I'm playing around on Instagram these days.
I see
I'm
you.
the biomechanical man, and I'm
Yeah, I saw
posting
it.
what's on my mind. And
You're the new age $6 million man, Steve Austin style, kind of.
yeah, exactly. Trying to
Awesome.
be.
Dr. Fleisig, thanks so much for your time, but maybe more importantly, for all the work you've done over the years, not just with the pro guys who are well taken care of, but getting these messages to the youth, the parents, the coaches out there, man. It's just, you're one of the people I believe in the industry that's just really made the game better. So thanks so much for everything you guys do.
Thanks, Jeff. My pleasure being here.